Good afternoon. Happy Friday. Hope everyone is safe. We decided to do things a little different this 5-Minute Friday with all of the changes going on in Michigan, in the region, country, globally. So we decided to do a lot of different updates. There's a lot going on, and Microsoft Cloud specifically has a lot of interesting things going on. We're definitely going to have a security focus, but we're going to extend a little bit just because we know COVID-19 has been disruptive to virtually everyone. So first, I just wanted to share something within the Microsoft world is the Bing.com team at Microsoft. If you search COVID-19, you will be able to get these nice, quick little glances on what's going on in Michigan, the US, and global, and it's going to be specific for where you are in the globe. For Michigan specifically, it even gives kind of the breakdown by county. And just does a good job sourcing that information. So I know the media, of course, is going to be having a lot of information, but if you just want quick, direct facts, this is something that the Microsoft Bing team put together and has been kind of shared broadly around on LinkedIn and other platforms. So if you are curious and just kind of want to know where things stand on any given date, time, this is a really, really good resource for you just to have some of those details. Moving forward to some updates that are tied to Microsoft Cloud from a organization standpoint where we can immediately help. So from last week to today, or maybe it was yesterday, active usage on Microsoft Teams, which was already up to the 32 million, spiked to 44 million in less than a week. So we're talking about a ton of remote work being put on the platform. I know on Monday there was some notice that some organizations, some users might have had some unexpected some performance issues and things like that. But from what I've heard, Microsoft resolved that issue. I think Monday was that first day where we really saw what was happening. A lot of organizations took steps to get that going. So some new features rolling out. These ones are pretty exciting. These should help quite a bit for things. One, noise suppression. So Microsoft's leveraging artificial intelligence to remove background noise from calls automatically. One of the plugs there is just background noise isn't good in general. It's even harder when you have your kids, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend working, or the one that I've been dealing with here and there are my pets, my 2 dogs. They see somebody outside, they start barking. So it's going to use AI to automatically cut down on that, keep you focused on the meeting at hand. Another one, which is pretty awesome, and you can see it in the picture, is over here. There's going to be a new raise hand feature. So you can see that Megan is quietly waiting for her turn. That's going to be awesome because when you start working on these larger Teams meetings or just very busy, lots of people trying to get some pieces in, video at least helps to kind of see the body language. But even then, if you have a lot of people on, you're only seeing the four individuals that last spoke on the screen, and that's going to be a feature change coming up too. No ETA, but we'll be able to have more than 4 on the screen. You'll at least be able to get a clue on who has a question, so you as a presenter or facilitator can stop and have that kind of dynamic engagement with the audience on the call. Another big one right now is offline mode, which is going to be pretty interesting. It's going to provide the ability to read and draft responses on Teams with limited to no internet connectivity. So if internet is spotty, or for whatever reason, maybe you are in a car and internet goes out, or your home has a connectivity issue, you'll be able to read all the ones that have been cached on the Teams client, or on your cell phone, things like that. And you'll be able to respond, send it, and then as soon as you're connected again, it'll go ahead and push that out. So nice way to just try to keep up with multiple teams, multiple conversations. And then finally, this has been a long wait feature. I know that internally we've been waiting for a while just because it can get a little challenging when you get a lot of things going on. Being able to pop out chats in separate windows is coming very, very soon. We expect that to roll out shortly. with all the different things we're trying to do remotely, being able to kind of shuffle a little bit and have that spread out should make life a lot easier. So we're really excited to see that come out. All right, moving into security. So one of the things that we're going to look at today, because it covers a lot and this is something that's free, is the feature within Microsoft called security defaults. Security defaults provides a lot of features that usually cost, require a higher priced subscription or plan, and kind of consolidates them. So that way you can have some immediate security mechanisms in place as recommended by Microsoft. So the first one is the new unified multi-factor authentication registration process. It's a new portal. It's a lot more streamlined. It's way easier for users to follow. It also includes support to, as you're registering everything, it'll put those into the self-service password reset capability too. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's turned on, but it just goes through the registration so that information is captured. It's also then going to provide, security defaults will then provide MFA enforcement. And it's really focused on a couple of things. First, protecting administrators. Some of the common rules that you're going to see within Microsoft 365 is global administrator, security administrator, exchange user, and help desk administrators. If you have that role, it should already be on a separate account that's not tied to your production account where you're getting email and where you're doing your day-to-day. But above and beyond that, you're going to be required to use MFA if that's enabled. And all of these, it's a mandatory, all have to be enabled for this to work. And we'll talk through that a little bit more. Two, it's going to protect all users. So in addition to the admins, it's going to have a separate policy that's baked in where it's going to require MFA for all users. Really, really good, but we'll talk through some considerations around that. Blocking legacy authentication, awesome security default feature. So clients that don't use modern authentication, think of like Office 2010 is an outdated client that doesn't use it. Historically, it would have been like native mail apps on your iPhone or Android cell phone. They typically didn't support modern auth. I know iOS does, pretty sure Android does too. So the native mail apps, but there's reasons why we still don't necessarily want to use those. But it's also going to block any client that is using the older mail protocols like POP, IMAP, POP3, IMAP, SMTP, things like that. Just older, they don't understand MFA, so they cannot get prompted for it. So it just provides a security risk because you could have MFA enabled, but if somebody tries to connect via POP or IMAP, they're not going to get prompted for MFA because the system doesn't understand what modern authentication is, so it can't process it. And it's not something that you can just update because it's protocol. So it's not that straightforward. So it's just, it blocks those legacy authentications. There's a lot of modern capabilities. The recommendation here is use Outlook for iOS or Outlook for Android. It's going to provide the best experience. And we get into protecting data on devices. It'll open the door for you to be able to use things like mobile application management and kind of secure those that way. The fourth one under the MFA enforcement is protecting privileged actions. This one's going to be a little more specific to the Azure side. So the Azure management portal, the Azure PowerShell capability, and then Azure command line interface. So those are also going to be included in the MFA enforcement. Pretty much if you have access to do things, it's going to enforce MFA and protect you from that. From an authentication methods, security defaults being a free service, they're just including that by default. The only option available is notification through the mobile app, which is going to be the Authenticator app, the Microsoft Authenticator app. That can be used for any third-party website like Amazon, Facebook, and all that stuff, so you can have people use it there. But you're going to have to use the actual Microsoft Authenticator app. You can't use like the Google Authenticator app or something like that unless you have the premium version. And that's where we can kind of see the differences between the options available. So via conditional access, which we'll have a slide on in a sec, this shows you where you get those richer capabilities. But if you're looking for the quick free version, that's going to be the only option you have available. Looking at conditional access, so you're only able to leverage conditional access policies that are aligned to the security defaults. if you already have conditional access policies or plan to add your own unique ones, you will not be able to because of how this works. You're getting the free versions of a bunch of things, and Microsoft enforces that by making you work within those parameters. Conditional access is super powerful for those that have not seen it before. This is the simple version based on who you are as a user, or maybe your location, what device you're using to access, what application. So think Exchange Online versus SharePoint versus Teams versus a third-party integrated app like Salesforce or Dynamics CRM, or the list goes on and on. There's thousands and thousands of apps that natively integrate with Azure AD. And then real-time risk, you can use all of those signals to determine what should happen. So do you just allow access? Do you require MFA? Do you block it? There's a bunch of more and more like the advanced side of what you can do. It's a super powerful engine. And then based on what you do, it'll either allow or block or require that MFA action to be able to access that. So in a remote work environment that we're working in now, where we've got people coming in from all these new places, potentially even personal devices at times, it's just really, really important to understand conditional access is your friend. And with security defaults being a free feature, you can't use conditional access policies. If you try to, you'll get an error, and then you have to turn them off, and then that's a different story. So we'll come back to that. How do you enable it? If you have a new tenant, this is automatically enabled by default. This started, I think, late last year after Microsoft's Ignite conference back in November. So this was going to be the new default, just to make sure the tenant was secured. If you need to turn it on, these are the steps. So you log into the Azure AD portal, you go to properties, there's a manage security defaults, you turn it on. Now, it's very easy to turn it on, but the impact is pretty significant. And you can start to see some of the warnings for how you disable it. It's that if you have certain policies in configuration, it's going to cause some notable issues. I'm going to go back to the main screen for a second. So turning on MFA for all users sounds really good, but there's a lot of impact that you have to consider. If you have a lot of users, or right now it's not going to be very easy to communicate, this might be a very disruptive event. You really want to understand the strategy for how to do this, understand the impact to the users, understand how you're going to help users through this, because if they can't MFA successfully and they're having issues trying to go through the registration process, or you haven't taken into account what kind of devices people are using, they're going to get locked out. So that's something you really, really want to take into account, and something you probably want to talk to us first before you do this. Number two, blocking legacy authentication. The first bucket isn't going to be an issue if you're using Office 365 Pro Plus, the subscription version of Office. But if you're still using Office 2010, 2013, and a little bit sometimes even to 2016 based on how it's configured, you're going to run into potential issues, and you just want to be very cautious. So you can run reports to find out what people are connecting with and make sure that you don't run into any issues and block people. Any client that uses older mail protocols, it's not super common for people to use it, but it's very, very common for systems to use it. So line of business applications, sending email directly to Exchange Online, scan to email, voicemail to email. So this blocks it across the tenant, and without conditional access to exclude those kind of service accounts and things like that, you could run into issues. So you just need to go through proper planning to make sure that these two specifically are not going to be negatively impacted. That's where we can help you and determine if it is security defaults are a fit. Again, if people don't have a mobile phone that can support it, or if they're unwilling to deploy the Authenticator app on their personal phone, and we do see that, and that becomes more of an HR kind of issue on how to work through that. You can't use these alternatives, which might be a little more employee friendly or contractor friendly, which is especially more common in that regard of forcing somebody to install an app that they don't want to. You think that people don't care. Unfortunately, our experience shows there are some people that are very particular on what they'll install on their mobile phone. So having the additional features like text message to phone or call to phone, those become critically important if you're going to do MFA across the board. And that's where conditional access can help with some of that. So long story short, security defaults are great. Ultimately, we would be wanting to help you to deploy all of those same policies, but we would do it in a way that's a little more dynamic and adjusted to your specific business and technical needs. So while this is an option, you just need to be very thoughtful around it before you just turn it on, because it's everything all at once and you can't configure or exclude or anything like that. It's kind of an all or nothing approach. So if you are interested in some of these, or you're interested in this, reach out. We can help you determine if it's how to do it properly, if security default is the free right way to start, or if there's a more staged and more dynamically set way to enable and implement those policies. Next one, this is critically important right now. How do you protect your data on virtually any device? We look at Intune for this, and it's the difference between mobile device management and mobile application management. So when I mentioned earlier, use Outlook for iOS, use Outlook for Android for your employees, guide them to use those versus the native mail apps on their respective platforms. With mobile application management, we are able to protect the data and remove only the corporate data within those pieces. So this goes broader than just email on phones. It could go into SharePoint and Teams and Yammer and all of those pieces too. But right now, I think the immediate one is email. It's always been an issue, but now that we're going to have people even more mobile, we're going to be definitely emailing a lot more stuff around than we might traditionally do. It's just really, really important to really think about that. Of devices are out there. Let's just make sure that they're secure. For the more compliance-focused organizations, the ones that have regulatory compliance needs, we start to look at mobile device management a little bit more. This one has always had a questionable and controversial kind of view by end users, not as much IT. It's come a long way. Most of the platforms like iOS and Android both support a BYOD version of MDM, which provides a significantly better user experience. Platforms like Intune, where you still have to enroll those phones into it, significantly more user-friendly, literally shows a green box of all the things that IT will be able to see, and then a red box of all the things they can't see. And a lot of those stigmas around people are going to be able to see my pictures, my text messages, my location, my phone calls, all of that stuff doesn't happen in the BYOD model. Arguably, what wasn't really possible with Intune in a lot of those instances with the full-blown MDM. But between those two, it's something that you want to start to think about as you have people off in the field at home more than behind the corporate firewall sitting in the office. So be conscious of the laptops, mobile devices, and tablets that are out there. So if you're curious, we can help on that. The last one, which is a very interesting one, is we're hearing this from a bunch of different use cases. It's Windows Virtual Desktop. And what Windows Virtual Desktop allows us to do is provide basically what it sounds like. It's the newer version that's Azure-based for remote desktop services, where you remote into the server, have access to your pieces and all of that. This is the next version of Microsoft's kind of iteration for desktop virtualization technology. This was the general use cases before. It was for organizations that typically fall into security and regulation, financial services, healthcare, government, or there was elastic workforces, short-term employees, contractors, mergers and acquisitions. The list goes on and on. But now with kind of the mandated work from home or near mandated work from home, we're having to account for having laptops for everybody that are still going to be working during all of this. And we know that there's a massive laptop shortage right now in the market. For those that had desktops, can't really pick it up and take it home. So this is a really, really attractive solution. There's already significant interest in it since it launched back in September of 2019. But obviously now it's gone absolutely crazy on what's available. So what it looks like in a nutshell is it's the first and only multi-session Windows 10 experience delivered as a virtual desktop via Azure. So think if you're IT and you're savvy, you know what VDI is, virtual desktop infrastructure. VDI was a one-to-one, one Windows desktop, one server, and that's how it worked. It was really, really expensive, provided a good user experience, But those usage costs, was very cost prohibitive for a lot of organizations out there. Now we can do the best of both worlds. RDS with kind of that native Windows 10 desktop experience. People get their own backgrounds. They have their icons all over it. They have whatever applications they need, but we're sharing the resources of that session host running Windows 10 with a varying number of people based on what kind of workloads people are running on that local or that virtualized desktop. It's been optimized specifically for Office 365 Pro Plus. So Outlook caching, OneDrive caching, things like that are optimized now, and we'll talk about that in a quick second. If you're already using RDS and maybe it's just taxing your network because you're not used to having as many people hitting your on-prem network as you originally had designed it and scoped it for, you can migrate that up really easily into WVD. And while ultimately it's not as quick as doing it as minutes in a production environment, it is that quick and fast that in theory you could deploy and scale this in minutes. We definitely, once it's deployed, we can scale in minutes. That's the beauty of it. How does it look? What's it all about? Ultimately, it's using Azure Active Directory for identity management, and the service itself is just going to manage it. So for, again, the technical audience that knows how remote desktop services works, if I switch over, Microsoft is handling the web access, the diagnostics, the gateway, the load balancing, the broker, and the management, all inclusive. You don't even have access to that. It's completely controlled by Microsoft, and they take it off your plate. So you don't have those runtime costs. Your only focus is going to be on what you're actually delivering from a session host or remote app standpoint. So all you have to do is deploy and manage the virtual machines within your Azure environment. You can manage it with your existing tools like Configuration Manager or Microsoft Intune, or even simple things like Group Policy. And then you can simply connect it to on-prem resources. So we're not saying you have to move all of your business applications and databases into Azure. We're just going to put the session host up here. Microsoft is delivering this on their IaaS platform. So the compute, storage, and networking all managed by Microsoft and for Azure. And then you're just going to do a site-to-site VPN between your WVD environment and your on-premise environment. The reason why this is really attractive, and I've had conversations with clients this week about it, is most servers and most VPNs, that network infrastructure was not designed for all corporate users or even more hitting it simultaneously all at once. This is not a scenario that many IT leaders have planned for. This is unprecedented. So home connections too are notoriously not consistent, especially with cable internet, where it's going to be a little bit dynamic based on what your neighbors are doing versus fiber. Most people don't have fiber at home. A very, very small percentage probably do. So there's going to be some unexpected behavior too, just in terms of their home connectivity up. The value of WVD is that Microsoft redesigned and re-engineered how that network connectivity between the user's laptop, their cell phone, their tablet into the WVD service works, so they can access that Windows 10 multi-session desktop. And from there, it's going to be one connection from the Azure environment down to your office, so they can still access those business applications, databases, and file servers. From that, instead of having inconsistent or unreliable internet all hitting your VPN and network infrastructure, potentially overloading your RDS server, which wasn't scoped for that many users, Azure is available across all of the US, and it's designed at scale, and it's all using the Microsoft backbone for fast internet connectivity. Great user experience. Lastly, Epis Logic. How is all this possible? How did Microsoft solve the problem? They acquired a company called Epis Logic. It ultimately replaces the user container with a profile. So the profile container handles the roaming profiles and folder redirection. That results in dramatically sped up login and application launch times. The big ones really it's solving is going to be the Office cache data, the Outlook OST, that database where all the email is when you open up Outlook, the OneDrive cache, the Windows search database. Those are the big things that you usually have struggles with. The Epis Logic dynamically attaches these profile containers onto the session host that they're logging into for a phenomenal user experience. There's some other capabilities, but for right now, this is going to be the big one. Profile containers versus user profiles. That's what enables WVD to do what it does. Lastly, who's eligible for it? If you're already using any of the SKUs on the left-hand side, these ones are going to be kind of the more top ones, Microsoft 365 E3 or E5, or Microsoft 365 F1, or Microsoft 365 Business. You have rights to do that right now. If you are an RDS client right now, you have RDS CALs with software assurance on them, you have access as well. From a cost standpoint, session hosts are very affordable. I think from a runtime cost, it's usually about $3 to $4 per user per month is what it equates to. And there's obviously ways you can optimize that pricing pretty significantly. It's just something where once we better understand kind of the use case and what you need, we could really kind of give you some quick turnaround estimates on what it would look like. If you are managed by Microsoft, if your organization has a dedicated Microsoft account manager, and you may not know if you do, you can reach out. Typically, you would know you're typically buying on an enterprise agreement or a Microsoft product and services agreement like MPSA or an EA. Those are pretty good indicators. But if not, if you have a Microsoft dedicated account manager, Microsoft is now going to be funding this for select customers. So the whole WVD instance, implementation, up to 3 months of Azure runtime costs, Microsoft is going to provide that as long as you commit to having 25 monthly active users on the WVD service by the end of June. So huge offer. It just launched yesterday. Obviously, with what's going on, we can probably suspect that that had a lot to do with it because a lot of organizations are having struggles. So between what Microsoft's doing with Microsoft Teams, with the security capabilities, the MDM MAM capabilities, and WVD, there's a ton within the portfolio. And this is just a quick sample of the top ones that we're hearing about that can help you and your organization stay productive, continue to do what you do in your unique business, keep operations going, and serve your customers. So appreciate the time. I know this was a little bit longer than expected, but we're hearing a lot. So we wanted to do a mini kind of review of all the different things that we have available to you. And the best part, all this can be done very quick. It's all subscription based, so there's not huge upfront cost to any of it. So if you're curious of learning more, reach out to your red level account manager, and we can have a conversation and see how we can help. So with that, stay safe and enjoy your weekend, and hopefully we will be through this pandemic in the hopefully not too distant future. So thank you again. Have a good weekend.